Mr. Lawrence, could you lead us in a pledge of allegiance?
I pledge allegiance
Thank you so much, Chaplain. Thank you, Mr. Lawrence. I need a motion to suspend the rules. Moved by Mr. Lawrence. Second by Mr. Barrett. We got any questions? No questions? All in favor?
Want Lucy to read them?
Oh, okay, Lucy, read them into the minutes. You're gonna read it after the vote, yeah. All in favor? Okay, 5-0, motion carry. Ms. Lucy?
To our consent agenda, we're adding item 5Z, resolution confirming and approving appointment of Deputy Clerk of Municipal Court, Elizabeth Bradley. And to our routine agenda, we're adding a docket in the amount of $7,512.50.
Okay, I need a motion to, moved by Mr. Lawrence. I need a second by Mr. Barrett. Any questions? No questions? All in favor? 5-0, motion carry. Mayor's report?
Yes. Again, as mentioned in our prayer, this is a day that we all, the dreadful day that the Biloxi and of course Robert were paying the ultimate over the last few hours. But we're, all thankful for the men and women that serve as police and fire. So I just wanted to mention that, and that his picture's up here, and ongoing is a vigil at public safety, and I guess a good crowd is there, and what should be said will be said tonight. So, but on the mayor's report, I'll just ask you to spread the minutes of the Biloxi travel expense credit card.
Okay, great.
And that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Okay, I don't see any departmental reports. We're going to move on to council reports. Mr. Lawrence? Okay.
Certificates, I'm sorry. Didn't mean to jump in there. I'd like to say if Kai Davis to come up and let me present to her a certificate. Look like a queen today. All right. So this from the City of Biloxi, a certificate of appreciation by the authority vested in me by the people of the City of Biloxi. Kai Davis is hereby awarded this certificate of achievement in recognition for winning the title of National American Miss Princess Junior Preteen 2018 and 2019. So thank you so much and congratulations. Okay, well, I'll read it anyhow, okay? This is another certificate of appreciation to Emily Oliver. Is hereby awarded this certificate of appreciation in recognition for winning the Miss Wheelchair of Mississippi. So we thank her and appreciate her and congratulate her. So, thank you. Now, Mr. President, that concludes my report.
All right, thank you. Had the pleasure of hearing Ms. Kai sing this past Saturday, dynamic singer, absolutely. Okay, we're gonna, George, back to you.
The only thing I have to say, we went through something tragic over this weekend, but the reason we're able to do the things we do is because of people like Robert McKeithen that give his life up, just like the soldiers that defend the country, and here we come to have this meeting because of people like that. So all you can say to them is thank you, and thank you for the service that he gave us. So.
Thank you, George. Ms. Newman?
Yes, I would like to, of course, pray for Robert McKeithen and his family, his colleagues, all of law enforcement and first responders that helped and tirelessly helped, as well as the whole community, the boys' families, everyone everyone's lives have been ruined or touched in some way, and it's unfortunate. And so we have to pray as a community and come together as a community as a whole.
Thank you, Ms. Newman. Dr. Tisdale?
Yes, we certainly appreciate, although I can't speak for the McKeithen family and wouldn't presume to do so, but I'm sure they appreciate all the thoughts and prayers, as does the police department and certainly the city, and I know my colleagues here on the council. Other than that, I can't add anything to that. It's just going to be a somber week, but we certainly appreciate those first responders who serve, and we just can never, ever take them for granted. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tisdale. Mr. Barrett?
I'd like to echo the sentiments of my fellow council members. It's always a sad situation when someone passes and their life's taken unnecessarily with violence, but it even makes it a worse situation when it's someone who has given their life to serve others. And it's overwhelming, the support that we've got, not just from the city of Biloxi, but the whole community, the Gulf Coast, the state, just the region. I mean, it's pretty amazing, the support that we've seen. And we're appreciative of all of our first responders and the sacrifice that they make on a daily basis. And the McKeithen family will be in our prayers. And the city is here for that family for anything that they need. And it's a sad situation, but the resilience of this area is pretty amazing to see everyone come together like they have. And so we appreciate that as a city. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. And I have a few words, just echo the same thing that everyone else has said. It's a blessing to see the whole coast come together. The Sheriff Department, Chief John Miller, Chief Papania, and also our Sheriff, Mr. Peters. And it's just awesome to see everybody come together. Mayor Hughes coming over to support our mayor, Mayor Gillage. And it truly shows that we are one coast all together. So that's a total blessing that in the times of need, people are there for us. And I thank all of you guys for that. So thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to public agenda. A total of 45 minutes, 3 minutes per person, strictly enforced. I'm going to start over to my left, and then I'll go over to my right. Is there anyone else? Is there anyone on my left would like to speak? Anyone on my left? Yes, ma'am. You come on up to the podium. Please sign in and give your name and address for the record.
Okay. I'm Helen Mitchell, and I have prepared a package for everyone to see what I'm going through. I'm going to throw myself on your mercy. I'm serious. We have a house being built at 838 Ancient Oak Circle. It started 2 years ago. There's just a shell, and if you have the packet, you will see we prepared a packet for everyone. You will see what I'm going through. I have letters from other people in the neighborhood about this house. They had 6 and 8 and 9 foot weeds on this property. They have not maintained it ever since they bought the property, and then they started building houses, and they violated code after code, and they've had to tear stuff down and rebuild it. And they have no electricity, no windows, no doors, no kind of utility. And it's a danger to the children in the neighborhood. They can walk up and it's a 2-story building and they could go in and fall, and these people won't do anything. They're thumbing their nose up at everyone. They think the rules are for everyone else but them. But it's a dangerous situation. Why I'm here is I'm going to ask you to please ask them to finish the house in a timely manner or tear the thing down. Please, I am begging you. This has gone on for 2 years. They have not worked on the house in 9 months, and this is unacceptable. The code office has sent them a letter. They're not paying any attention to it. They came out today and they inspected, and it's still in a deplorable situation. And I know that y'all are the only people I can come to that can force them to go ahead and work on the house or abandon it. And I'm just asking you to please help. We all are taxpayers, and we have as much rights as they do. And when you have, they're one people, and we're a bunch of people. And we vote, we pay taxes, and we're just asking you to please help us. I think that Dr. Fordham is going to speak next.
Hi. First, let me say I appreciate being able to come talk to you. I've never done anything like this before, so excuse me if I'm just a little bit nervous. I also do feel a little silly talking about something like code violations and property values on such a tragic day, but here I am. I just want to echo what Ms. Helen said. I live adjacent to this property. Very little has been done on it in 2 to 3 years. I approach this from a safety issue. There are lots of small children in the area. I have 3 right next to the property, 3 small children. And then also, it just looks really bad. It looks terrible in there. I don't understand why it's taking this long. For everything I know about the builder, he has been in the community a long time. I think that he's an accomplished builder. I think that he can finish this property and make a very nice house. I simply don't understand why it's not happening. And that's really about it. I appreciate your time.
Okay, thank you. Okay, sir, I need to get your name and address.
I told you I was nervous. My name is Zachary Fordham. I live at 834 Ancient Oaks Circle in Biloxi, Mississippi.
Thank you, thank you. Anyone else to my left?
Hi. I just want to thank all of you for the time and the energy you've put into all of this. You've heard everything I've had to say before in emails and letters and me speaking, but this was an opportunity for me, whether it goes one way or the other, to thank all of you for taking the time to look at it. I also ask that you please deny the short-term rentals for Cypress Cove.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else to my left?
Good evening to all of y'all, and I know we've been up here 5 months fighting the battle with short-term rentals, and I just want to say that I am against it at Cypress Cove. I'm not against short-term rentals in other places, but this is a small place designed in the 60s. That front door is a 4 foot from the pool. When you have one weekend rentals there and lots of people, it's just going to create a lot of noise, traffic, and it's a neighborhood, and y'all have a signed petition from the neighborhood against this and letters that we've had sent in before. So we hope we get to finalize this. Thank y'all.
Thank you. Anyone else to my left? In the back? Oh.
I'm Margaret Brown. I live at 125 St. Jude. I've lived there for 30 years, and I really love our residential area. I hope it will stay that way, and I really feel that the short-term rentals will not add a thing to it, but deter that. And I hope I appreciate all of the time that you've spent listening to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else to my left? Okay. Anyone on the right? I'm coming back. I'm coming to the back. Come on. Yeah, come on, Mr. Stallworth. Would you? Then I'm going to the back.
I'm Bill Stallworth, 279 Bond Street. First of all, I do want to join everyone in giving our condolences to the family of such a fine officer who's been with the city for a very long time. And the community pours its heart out in trying to help the city do whatever is necessary to try and help the family as well as the officers who are going through so much. So I know this is very personal for a number of our officers. They really have and always will amaze me at their dedication and their willingness to do what most of us would think to be insane, just going in and facing danger on an everyday basis. So please, for all our people in public safety, I want to give them my personal condolences and support. I also rise to thank you for your efforts on the short-term rental. Councilman Barrett proposed an agreement at our last meeting, and I think would be very helpful in moving this project down the road a bit. It gives protection to those areas that can be legally, where short-term rentals can be held legally, and keeps the restrictions out of the residential single-family home areas that we don't need to have them in. So I commend you on such a hard task. As I said before, been there in your seats. I don't envy you in this regard, but you're doing very good. Thank you, and I would ask each and every councilman to support that amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Stallworth. Ms. Dickey in the back? Is that the one?
Hey, my name is Donna Joachim, and I'm representing the Board of Directors for the Mississippi Center for Autism. And I just wanted to thank the City of Biloxi for supporting us. We had a Walk Without Limits, and I worked with Sherry Bell in the City of Biloxi, her Parks and Recreation Group, and Tara Dickey. And on behalf of the board, we want to thank FOFO for coming out and being the Grand Marshal, or at least kicking the walk off. And we had all children with disabilities walking around the backside of the Shuckers field, and then they came in on the far side, and the Shuckers allowed them to walk on around where they received a medal. So I was standing there, and all of a sudden here they came through, and to my amazement, Fofo had done the walk with them. And they were so excited to see him and him leading them all the way around. And the young lady that received a certificate, both ladies that should have received a certificate tonight, were also present. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Did I miss anyone? Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name is Suzanne Huber-Giat. I live at 14360 John Lee Road in Biloxi. And I guess it's difficult this evening. Everyone has very heavy hearts. Seems hard to talk about things that seem trivial in comparison. I have two cases coming before you this evening for conditional use application. But first I'd like to address the LDO. There are changes in the LDO this evening, and I would like to say if there's going to be a ruling for conditional use and it's done outside of the proposed and the current LDO, that I agree with Councilman Gines that maybe there should be an overlay district. Having a lot of gray areas in the conditional use, having to come to you and having neighbors pitted against neighbors because it is unclear, I think would be cleared up with a overlay district. That being said, I'd also like to say that I've attended every council and planning commission meeting, and it's difficult to continually be admonished that I didn't do my due diligence. Prior to the purchase, I did read the HOA bylaws and knew the developer had and still has the right to change those bylaws. I also read the criteria for the conditional use, and I knew I met those criteria as it was worded in the LDO. I would like you to consider more changes in the current LDO. I don't think it's as good as it can be yet, and I'd also like you to consider my application this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Did I miss anyone? Okay. Okay, come on up, sir.
Thank you for allowing me to speak this afternoon. Good afternoon, or evening now. Thank you all, the City Council and the Zoning Board, for considering all sides in the short-term rentals in Biloxi. Y'all have really given it a lot of careful, deliberate thought, and we appreciate all of that. And thank you for considering leaving commercial buildings with the right to short-term, and also protecting the residents by making the RM 20s and 30s adhere to the ordinance of the conditional use. I think it's all moving the right way, and I thank you all again for letting me talk.
Okay, thank you, sir. Is anyone else? Okay, I made an error earlier in the council's report, and Mr. Deming wanted me to give an individual his time, and I wanted to honor that because of in his absence. Mr. Sims, or is there Mr. Sims here? So I want to give you that opportunity on behalf of Mr. Deming, Councilman Deming. Yes.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Councilman Gines, for letting me speak after Mr. Deming was not going to be here tonight. We weren't aware we were going to be on tonight's agenda. I'm here in support of the 5 conditional use applications for the allowance of the short-term rentals at the Beachview 2-bedroom condominiums at 1282 Beach Boulevard. And these on the overhead are the 9 criterion to take into consideration in deciding whether a conditional use should be approved. At the Planning Commission, these were addressed in detail, and I'm sure you've all read the lengthy packets from those transcripts a few months ago. Some of these 9 criterion were irrelevant, and the others clearly supported approval. But I'd like to run through these quickly. Section 2324 says, a conditional use permit shall be approved only upon a finding that the following standards are met. Does it comply with the existing zoning? In this case, for conditional use of short-term, yes. Does it comply with use-specific standards in section 2343? Yes, the residential purpose of lodging. Is it compatible with the surrounding? On 3 sides, you have RM30 zoning, RM20 zoning, and waterfront, all of which short-term are allowed. It needs to avoid adverse economic, odor, noise, glare, and vibration impacts. First and foremost, it enhances the economic impact of the individual condo, and all residents post allowance of short-term or long-term or owners, I would adhere to the same noise regulations that anyone else in the city or in the condo complex would. Designed to screen or buffer adverse visual impacts. This entire complex was designed to already screen and buffer in the design of everyone entering to the inward to the complex. For all the neighbors surrounding this, all you see are the exterior windows, parking lots, what you can see through the large oak trees that surround and bound the property to the neighbors to the north, to the vacant lots to the east, and the vacant lots to the west. Obviously, it has no change whether we have short-term rental of deterioration of water or air quality or natural resources. The egress and ingress and safe road conditions are identical whether someone is renting for 29 days or 30 on that complex and has already been approved. It allows for the protection of property values, in our opinion, if it's granted for those who paid the premium knowing that this was their intent to have higher-end leasing short-term units in their place. And it would comply with all other relevant laws and regulations. When you read and listen to the opposition, what you hear mostly from people is, we don't want it. We don't want it by people unaffected is not one of the criterion in the conditional use statute for which we are applying under. There's a reason for that. Nothing would ever be approved and progress would never be made if we don't want it was a criterion. The application of the standards to the more than 24 short-term rentals.
Excuse me, Mr. Sims, your time is up.
Yeah, go ahead. He's got Robert time. Let him go.
How much longer?
Maybe
how much time
6
you got?
minutes. Yeah.
How much more time you think you
5 minutes, 3 minutes.
Go ahead,
I can go
give him
faster.
about 4 minutes.
I didn't know I had a
Okay, go ahead. 5 more minutes. You got Robert's time. Well, because he's using the council member's time, I made an error in the beginning, and that was my time. That was my error. I was supposed to let him speak when the councilman spoke under Robert Deming's time. I just wanted to make that clear.
The application of the standards to the more than 24 short-term rentals already approved should be applied equally and consistently to these applications as well. To do otherwise would be arbitrary and capricious. Among the reasons given during the denial were those that bought with the intent to short-term lease were sophisticated investors, concern that some applicants had been using the space to short-term prior to arrival, and that the zoning to the west and the north are in a single-family zone. This, first of all, the property to the west is RM30, and this is your view from the west. This will also be the view from the west, a 500-foot vacant lot with trees, if there are people renting for 29 days tomorrow, or if there are only people renting for 30 days. Notwithstanding, it is not accurate that simply being adjacent to one side of a residential property makes it non-compatible based on prior conditional use standards applied in approvals. It is also not a criterion that if the applicant is, quote, sophisticated, they rise to a higher standard. Finally, in light of the recent licensing of over 100 new short-term rentals filing after years of non-compliance due to the new finding system, I thought the goal of the city was to bring those operating outside the regulations onto the system to assure tax payments, safety regulations, not to penalize them for past operations. At the Planning Commission, there was some confusion regarding the covenants and whether they allow short-term rental. The answer is yes, and here they are, and they've been admitted to the official record. On October 29th of 2018, the directors of Cypress Cove Condominiums voted to change Section 1207 leases to remove the restriction of rentals of less than 30 days. On February 22nd, 2019, these amended bylaws were filed and recorded at the Harrison County Land Records Office. Article 7, paragraph 7.12 of the Declaration states, "The bylaws and rules adopted by the developer shall govern, and the developer shall have the exclusive right to appoint, remove, designate officers and members to the board." And Section 4.01 of the bylaw states, "The board of directors of the association shall be appointed by the developer until the first annual meeting following the date on which all units in the condominium have been closed and sold, at which time those in the complex have a say in the board of directors." There may be some attempt to claim it is unknown as to whether allowing high-end tourists to lease the property for short amounts of time will somehow economically damage surrounding property values adjacent to what was a cheap rent apartment for decades. It will not. We have met the 9 conditional statutory guidelines on which to provide our case on the merits. Even Director Creel stated at the hearing, quote, "I could make a case for many of these conditions either way." This is not a statement of failure to meet the guidelines. We have HOA bylaws amended and recording legally that does not limit the term of which renters will lease. The 5 units here today have not one single actual complaint as to their guests violating HOA or city rules. The 5 units here today represent $1.4 million in new condo purchases on beachfront property in RM30 zoning, wherein the land use ordinance allows this council to approve this conditional use. We ask you to look at those 9 criterion and the clear adherence and qualification of those applications to that standards. Short-term rentals is part of a growing and successful tourist market. If we want to be able to compete in that tourist market, we must be able to provide the same, if not more. We ask the council to please overturn this decision by the Planning Commission, and I sincerely thank you for your time and patience since October when we started this process.
Thank you, Mr. Sims. Okay, did I miss anyone out there? Because that was my error. Okay, we're going to go ahead and close citizen comments, and we're going to move on to policy agenda, ordinance A. Lucy?
Ordinance to amend the Biloxi Land Development Ordinance pertaining to short-term rentals.
That was moved by Mr. Lawrence. I second that. Mr. Lawrence, you have any questions?
There were a couple things I'd like to ask Jerry Creel to come up. I know everybody's been working on this, trying to get it down pat. We made some adjustments, amended a few things. I know there's always been a concern in the back of everybody's heads about the commercial, the residential 20 and 30 RMs. And with the Planning Commission, what did they do that they not passed that or stepped away from it? Where we took the residential in those particular neighborhoods and said they could not do these things, but just in the 20 and 30, what are we actually doing? Because I know some of the stuff PA Biden had changed. I know Nathan Bash put a few things in. So exactly where are we sitting at with the 20 and 30 RMs and residential neighborhoods?
The Planning Commission did not recommend any changes to RM20 and RM30. They were conditional use in they're conditional use in the ordinance now, and under the revised the draft here that's on the agenda today, they'll remain conditional use.
There always seemed to be a problem. They said it's just so hard to control that in the residential area. Why is this worse in the residential than commercial?
Because we're so dependent on neighbors calling and reporting what's going on, and also the fact that many of the people who own these single-family units, when they advertise on the internet, they understand the way that we track them now, so they will leave the address off. They'll just put pictures of the parts of the structure and the interior, so it's a guessing game as to where this thing is located. If one of our code officers or someone doesn't recognize where it is, then we're kind of at the mercy of having to get out there and drive until we find it.
There's another question I always had, exactly how we're gonna collect this money. We're supposed to be doing is have some type of control, and we're supposed to be able to collect 12% like the hotel motel association. How do we collect that?
Well, it'll go to the state just like any other,
And it's got to state that's 12% on what? Just whatever they turn in?
it's,
So if they were in it for $500, turn in $100, you get 12% on $100.
Way it should be. They could be submitting through the TAP account, whatever, sales tax that,
that's the way it works.
should be collected on a monthly basis.
Now, that's another question. I mean, somebody, we had somebody truck to MGM Park collecting their sales taxes. So it's not that easy, just go, just go have it down there.
This is why.
That's how you get the control is my problem
Right,
with all this stuff. And this is what we're trying to do.
important. This is why it's so important for us to make sure that anyone operating one of these short-term rentals has a business license. Because when we issue the privilege license, that's a notification to the state that they should be expecting taxes to come in on this particular operation. Also, they're changing, the use is changing on the structure from being just a permanent single-family structure or dwelling unit to now being a commercial operation. That's why it's important for the tax assessor to know about that, because the use is what determines the level of taxes, not the zoning. So if they're using it for a commercial purpose now, then theoretically the taxes should go up.
And I know you said a lot of people are doing this stuff pretty much illegally. They would just rent them until somebody turned them in. That's always been a problem with me with the grandfather clause. I have a problem with how you grandfather something illegal.
Well, with what's on the agenda tonight, the grandfather clause is irrelevant. The purpose of the grandfather discussion was that if the regulations were going to change and someone got their license, their application and their license approved before the regulations changed, they would have been grandfathered in. But because the regulations, the zonings are not changing, the grandfather status is a non-issue now.
Anyone else? Dr. Tisdale?
Yes, Mr. Creel, RM20 and RM30 residential multifamily, typically the density is what changes, 20 or 30 units per acre, I think is what it is. And those are primarily apartment complexes and condos, maybe condos, but usually apartment complexes. Also, in the conditional use, you would put the category of neighborhood business, and I'm sure there's a reason for that, if you could just enlighten us a little bit.
Actually, that came in as a request from a citizen who had a piece of property in NB zoning and called and asked if the Planning Commission, the staff in the Planning Commission would consider making a recommendation to the City Council that short-term rental be allowed as a conditional use in NB. We have a lot of NB property in Biloxi. Most of it is up and down Pops Ferry Road. We've got some on Pass Road. We've got some on Howard Avenue. And it's most of the properties that face those streets. Now, once you get behind the properties that are facing that street, you may have residential, you may have commercial, but allowing it as a conditional use opened the door for the public hearing so that the arguments could be made either way. You'd still be able to hear from the neighborhood that surrounds that property.
Right, and it'd still be considered by the Planning Commission. They'd formulate a recommendation that would come before the council.
That's correct. Yes, sir.
On the short-term rentals, we're talking about how's this money collected, and over the years, I started to say months, but it's been years now for folks who have been following this issue. We've heard that, for example, Airbnb, if you book with Airbnb and I list my property on Airbnb, then Airbnb collects their fee and the taxes. Is that your understanding?
That's what we were told,
So
yes.
the platform that I'm using to advertise my property is going to collect those monies and file their annual report or quarterly report or whatever, and those taxes are going to be collected by the company or platform, in this case Airbnb, and sent to the state, and eventually it shows up in our tax diversion.
That's correct. That's our
Okay.
understanding, yes.
Okay, If, I can't, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett.
Couple questions. Can you tell me what 23-9-6 in the, got it taken down now, I guess it's in the LDO is?
I don't have the LDO with me. Do you have a copy? I'll take a look at it.
It's the, let me, here, I've got it right here. Let me get down to this. It says, any violation of this or these short-term rental provisions may result in the remedies and penalties found in section 23-9-6 of the remedies and penalties section of the land development ordinance.
Okay, in both the land development ordinance and the code of ordinances, there are certain sections that refer to penalties, and typically it's fines, and it would fall to those unless we have a specific fine listed.
Which we do, which
Yes.
is number K, or letter K.
We do.
Okay. Okay, I've read through this, and I think this entails everything that we discussed last week. However, the only thing that I see that's missing, and I read over this, and I guess I just missed it when this came out, but was the provision that if someone was a multiple, had multiple violations, that they would have to come before the council, and we had the option or the choice as to permanently revoke their license or something like that. I don't see that in here, and it may be, I may just be overlooking it. But outside of that, I'm fine with this. I think everything that we had agreed on last week is in here outside of that one thing, and that's something that we can amend. Is that correct?
Yes.
When we're treading on sticky territory there. When you have someone that's operating under a use by right and they have a legitimate license, that's a legal question, but, revoking their license, you're going to have to be on very, very solid ground. This is essentially what you would be doing, is taking the use by right and turning it into a conditional use.
Okay, I have a question. The lady that had the bar across the street, didn't we take her license away because she had multiple shootings and violations at that bar? Is there a difference in that and what I'm saying?
It's possible. I'm not an attorney. I think that the issues that were there were life safety issues as opposed to violations.
Okay. Well, we can leave it like this and then look at that later.
Yeah.
And if it's something, we can amend this at any time and add that if it's something that we're allowed to do. Is correct?
Okay.
Okay. That's the only questions I have.
Okay. And I have no further questions. Thank you, Mr. Grill. Is there anyone else have anything?
I'm like Nathan, we're not finished with this. It'll be back. I mean, that's like all LDO. It's like all LDOs. You put it on the table, you do what you got to do. And if you have to amend and change it later, we do that all the time. So it's nothing new. And there might be some things might turn out better. It might work out great the way it is. And that's what we'll look at. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to call for the question. All in favor? Okay, 5-0. Motion carries. Resolution B. Ms. Lucy.
Resolution to deny conditional use approval for property located at 1282 Beach Boulevard, Unit 211, located within Cypress Cove.
I move to deny planning commission.
Can I make a recommendation to take B, C, D, and E and vote on them all at one time since they're all in the same complex?
Okay, you're going to move all three?
It's four. It's
Definitely.
four.
All four?
It's four.
There's four of them.
Okay.
I move all four to deny.
I'll second.
Okay, we move B, C, D, and E by Mr. Lawrence. Second by Mr. Barrett. Any questions?
So right now, the motion is just to consolidate these 4 items.
Yes, and vote on them at one
together.
time.
All right,
Yes.
and then we don't have a motion yet on the action the council's going to take
Not
the
yet.
decision.
We're-
This is just to consolidate.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we have any questions on B, C, D, or E, Mr. Lawrence?
No question. Call for the question.
Ms. Newman?
Don't we have to make a motion?
Okay.
We just made a
Oh,
motion
we
to
made a motion to
consolidate. We have-
consolidate?
Somebody has to make a motion to deny
Okay,
or not
so
deny.
you moved it to consolidate it, you second?
Okay.
Right, but right
Yes.
now, we're consolidating to
So now
vote
we have
on
to
all
make a
four of these
motion
at
to
once.
move.
So we've had a motion to consolidate by Mr. Lawrence.
We don't have to. Have to do that. Yeah,
So somebody, so.
he moved all four of them.
to
And his
deny.
second,
Okay,
all
so
four of them.
We're voting to deny all
Four of
at
them.
this time.
And we're in the questioning period now.
All right.
Any questions, Mr. Lawrence?
And the motion was made by Mr. Lawrence, and the second was by,
Mr. Barrett?
thank you.
On all four?
Okay.
Okay, you have any questions, Dr. Tisdale?
Not a one.
Ms. Barrett? Mr. Barrett? Ms. Newman?
I've said it before about Cypress Grove. I think it's an animal of its own because of the HOA and the residents that don't want it, that claim that they have contracts stating that it would never change, and then the HOA decided to go ahead and change it. I think that is something that needs to be dealt within before it even comes to us. We're not here, we're not judges, so we can't, I don't feel like we have the right to tell this complex if they have the right to do that or not. I think they need to get that situation taken care of before they even come to us. We are the city council for Biloxi and not a judge on, what is that, a civil matter? So I think that needs to be taken care of before we even vote on this issue.
Okay. B, C, D, and E has been properly moved in second. With no further questions, all in favor of the die? All against? Well, 5-0. B, C, D, and E denied. Okay, I need a motion on the consent agenda.
So moved.
Moved by Dr. Tisdale. I need a second.
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Barrett. Mr. Lawrence, do you have any questions on any?
Yeah, the mayor said we're going to table Z, but
Correct. You have to explain she's been working in these just for certification. She's been through a probation period, so this proper.
It's proper, because for the probationary period.
we want to make sure.
Yes.
The next one, I appreciate y'all doing this stuff. I know Mike Lynn's been working hard on the mausoleum. I know it's putting a lot of pressure on the man trying to build it now.
Councilman, you remember that you actually poked us to pay a little more attention to that mausoleum and to the arrangements that the mausoleum would have with the city, long-term perpetual care. So again, as I've told you, and I'll share with the rest of the council, we went to the Secretary of State's website and we referenced in this resolution all of the requirements provided by the Secretary of State for a private cemetery for perpetual care. Extensive requirements regarding reporting, trust accounts, percentages of sales that have to be set aside. All of those requirements are now incorporated into this resolution, and that's to protect the city long-term.
So all the proper steps he'd have to take, he'd have to go through the city and Secretary of State.
Right. Everything's in that Secretary of State, and in this case, the resolution requires him to report to us annually what he's reported to the Secretary of State. So I think this pretty well ties up with the loose ends with regards to how that mausoleum would operate.
And just like the perpetual care, then he's tied into them, and he has to make sure the money's funded so he can take care of that mausoleum once it's built.
Right.
Yeah, I thought that was a good thing. I appreciate you doing that. Another one, the only other one, I just want to ask about, with all these canal diggings, have y'all, I don't see anything listed on Keegan's Bayou. Are we working on something? 'Cause
On
you need a
Keegan's
lot
Bayou,
of-
Keegan's Bayou is near and dear to my heart, as you know, Councilman, because I grew up on Keegan's Bayou. We have 2 years in a row put in a Tidelands request for a grant to clean up Keegan's Bayou. Hasn't been approved yet. We'll be putting it in again this year. That's not the sedimentation that we're the dressing here. This is more doing the dredging of small canals in and around where people are doing recreational boating.
We met with the governor regarding Keegan Bayou, and it's one of the 3 projects we brought to his attention to get, I guess, on the radar. But in more of a blue way, opening it more to tidal action to clean it out and actually enhance our the ability to drain half of Biloxi through that half of Keesler. Almost all of Keesler goes that way. So we have met with them, but in a general way, we're asking for about 5.3 million, something like that.
It's changed each year as the bayou fills in. That bayou, as you know, feeds all the way up through the middle of Biloxi. When there's a storm, the storm surge pushes all the way up into Keesler.
It's filled in, so we're trying to clear it out.
I was just wondering on some of the things, there's a certain depth you have to go to when you're cleaning them out. Is it, you're trying to lower to what?
Each one of these dredging sites that we get permitted, each permit tells us how deep we're supposed to go or are allowed to go and how close we can go to the where the marsh grass is and so forth. So what we're doing now is we've pretty much spent the dredging money that we had, and now we're setting up a new project for sedimentation. We've gotten $100,000 in a Tidelands grant that will come to us in the fall, and we've put some additional money that's coming from the county from the port money. We put that additional money in, and we're going through our engineering firm that does our permitting for us now to permit a whole bunch of new sites around Back Bay, where again, where recreational boating has become really constricted because the little channels and so forth are filling in. So it's a maintenance dredging, you might say.
Thank you.
Sediment removal.
Anything else, Mr. Lawrence?
Mr. Henry left in time.
This is all of it.
Ms. Newman? Dr. Tisdale?
Yes, on item G, I talked with Mr. Leonard, and my understanding is they're looking at pulling together some plans or drawings to renovate the first floor downstairs and some other things.
Yeah.
Don't let too much out of the bag at this point.
No, Councilman, you and I have had many conversations about this. The incidents of this last 24 or 48 hours has convinced us the time has come for us to do something to secure the city hall a little better than it's secured today, similar to the way the police department is secured. So we've asked the firm of Frank Genzer to draw up plans for us on what we can do. We'll get somebody like Hurricane Electronics, for example, that's done the work at the police department to give us some ideas and see if we can't pull something together to secure this site. Both during the flag incident a while back and since then, we've had angry people show up in these events, and
y'all need to be nicer to these people.
Well, yeah. Well, that's easy for you to say. You're the one sitting behind the
Exactly.
You've got a place to hide.
It is. I'm right behind you.
Yes, sir. So anyway, if you'd be patient with us, we're going to try and sketch something out and come back to the council with a plan to.
Right. And what I was going to suggest is we just table this for a month.
Okay.
To the first meeting in June. I think that's June 4th on item G.
I'll second that.
There's a motion, there's a second.
Okay. Moved by Mr. Tisdale, second by Mr. Lawrence. Any questions on the tabling of item
I have a comment real quick.
Okay.
I talked to Stephen Palazzo yesterday, and this actually came up, and he told me that they just finished their office in Gulfport, and he encouraged that we come and look at that they have a very secure facility over there. And so he encouraged that we come and check that out for some ideas for our city hall and police department even. So.
Thank you. Will do.
Call for the question.
Okay, call for the question. I thought you had something else to say. Call for the question. All in favor? We got 5-0.
All right. Then on the other item, I just want to note it for the record that I am recusing myself from item 5I. That's the mausoleum perpetual care and everything. as I've done on that issue since it's been before the council. That concludes my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Barrett.
On item I talked to Mr. Barker on Wednesday night, maybe, or Sunday night, not sure, one night at church. And I went over this with him, and he has agreed to sign and to all these terms. He had some questions, but he has agreed to sign on that, so I'm asking everyone to support that, as well as V, which is accepting the Tidelands Fund grant from Marine Resources for the Eagle Point Park. That's all.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Barrett. And I also want to come on, that was one of my issues there, was that there, and now that he got it resolved, I'm okay with it. Okay, a call for the question on all of the consent agenda. All in favor? 5-0. Motion carried. Code enforcement hearings. Mr. Creel, we lost Mr. Creel. He's gone.
Everybody left.
Yeah, everybody's leaving. Do anyone want to stay?
Krista can't be on. She can't know what he's feeling. Hey, what about? Jerry's probably outside doing the interview. Get that turned around and stuff. Yes. Check XF if he can do it.
Lucy, could we go ahead to the routine agenda and come back to this? I sort of suspect
This
Jerry's outside
thing
doing
that
an interview. I guess. I don't know. And ask Ed. Ed Chambra. Ed.
Jerry coming back? Jerry's coming back.
Never mind, Ed. Stay seated. Thought we might have to throw you into the breach here. Thank you. Thank you. We also serve who stand or sit and wait.
Chamber. Jerry's always leaving us.
Are we ready?
Come on, Chris, this ain't overtime money, you know what I mean?
Item A on the agenda, Mary W. Ladnier, 550 Beach Boulevard. That case has been resolved.
All right, there you go.
Item B on the agenda, Jason J. and Latrice N. Reese, 341 Hiller Drive. This case is still in violation.
He was cleared. That's beautiful.
Purpose of this picture is to show you that there's no power on the house and that it's open and that there are people going in and out of it. So it's an open structure and the property's overgrown.
Is anyone here to speak on behalf of Jason L. and Latrice Reese? Anyone here to speak on behalf of Jason J. and Latrice Reese? We'll consider that matter closed.
What, well, while you're sitting up there, what is the deal with this ancient oak? Have you had this before us?
Yes, sir. We're actually working on that case. What happens with a building permit is that when someone pulls a building permit, if they pull it and they do absolutely nothing, that permit expires after 6 months, and they have to come back in and start all over again unless we find a reason to grant them an extension. But in the case where someone pulls a permit and they continue to work on that structure, even if it's a little bit, as long as they work on it periods of time within those 6 months, the permit does not expire. Now, what's happened on this house is that there's some overgrowth there that we'll address, but as long as these people continue to work on it every 6 months, then there's not a whole lot we can do about it under the code.
Oh, that's pretty weak.
Well, I mean,
that's pretty weak. So that's something we just talked about, that it needs to be brought back to us where we can do something. people can't live on side of stuff like that for years.
Yeah.
That's foolish. And us, we have no control over that. That's terrible on our part.
Well, and we'll bring the overgrowth and anything that's unsafe back to the city council. If they go for 6 months without working on it, then we can bring it before you to have it secured. But, you know, we're limited to what the code says, so.
What if we change the code instead of 6 months to make it 60 days?
Well, it's the building code, and the rule on the building code is a lot different than the LDO. The LDO, you have the flexibility to change. The building code says that you can always go above what the building code requires. The council can always adopt legislation above what it requires, but it can never go below what the code requires. This is more of a policy type section in the code. So that's something we could probably talk to legal about and see if there's something we
I
could
was
do.
wondering who sets that policy? Because if I understood you correctly, we could change that to, instead of no activity for 6 months, we could change it to no activity for a year, but we can't reduce it less than 6 months. Is that accurate?
That's correct, yes, sir.
So somebody's setting that standard. If you said it's in the building code, then it's,
The building code is an adopted document, just like the fire code. It is the minimum standards for building a structure. And whenever you're dealing with the building code, it's life safety, and this is in kind of an administrative section of the code, so there could be something in there that we could look into and see about changing.
I recall that we had a situation in Channel Mark, as a matter of fact, you and I talked about, and it took, I don't know, almost 2 years for the house to be built, but I understand Mr. Lawrence's concern is, geez, if I was living there 2 years later, this is all you have to show for it. I don't know.
How come we can't shut them down? Just because they put a nail in there every 6 weeks? There's something wrong with that thing.
They need to make some significant improvement to the structure.
There is significant improvement. Obviously, they hadn't done anything.
Well, if you look at the picture that Mr. Leonard had, it looks like they've just put Tyvek on the house. The Tyvek was obviously not old. It had just been installed now.
And it's flying in the breeze, too.
Yeah,
Does that do a good job of that either?
Yeah.
I mean, we're controlling all those other people, we're on top of everybody, and yet we're having something like this. This kind of reminds me of one on Carver Street. I've been in the office 18 and a half years, he's still building that one on Carver Street, 18 and a half years. And don't have a roof on it yet. I mean, that's getting to be, you know, that main shot coming down Carver Street. Look at that gray building. He paints one corner, then he puts it back up next year. I mean, we gotta do something better than that.
We've written that up, and that's going to be coming to the city council. So
Okay, as we wrap up code enforcement hearing, we want to move on to the routine agenda.
I'll make that motion.
Moved by Dr. Tisdale. I'll second it. I'll second that. George, you have any questions about the routine agenda?
Yeah, we got the money rolling. Big check.
The money that Walt spoke to the other week about the 427,000, we got that money in, and then there's another 2.3 million that's in the pipeline right now. So,
I appreciate that. And every week, you and Walt, y'all doing well. You keep it rolling. Thank y'all.
All right, any other questions? Okay, I'm gonna call for the question. All in favor? 5-0, motion carried. Need a motion to recess?
So moved.
Moved by Dr. Tisdale, second by Mr. Lawrence. Any questions? All in favor?
Could I ask that we recess in memory of Officer McKeithen?
McKeithen, yes.
Moved and seconded by the
Second by
entire
everybody.
council.
Yes. All in favor? 5-0.
Not a problem. That's some of the things like that. Some houses that got built like that, they ain't doing it right. You gotta be able to do something about that.